Birds gotta fly. I gotta love one man till I die. Can't help loving that man of mine. Tell me he's lazy. Tell me he's slow. Tell me I'm crazy. Maybe I know. Can't help loving that man of mine. When he goes away, that's a rainy day. When he comes home, the day is fine. The sun will shine. He can come home late as can be. Not home without him is no home to me. Can't help loving that man of mine. Wow. Valentine's month,
And happy early Valentine's Day. Our chaplain, Dick Leach, will be doing the invocation and leading us in the pledge to the flag over here on the wall. And regrets that Dennis Brown had a conflict and couldn't make it. Dick?
It's the invitation.
Stand if you can and join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, Sovereign Lord over all, we praise you for your being and we thank you for your providential care. We acknowledge that when you created the world, you set things in place. You brought order out of chaos and confusion. You gave laws to guide us into righteousness. You established governing authorities to restrain the rebellious, the ungodly, and the violent. We thank you that we have been blessed in America with a process to formulate law that can reflect your holiness and power, that can keep in check our capricious, self-centered behavior, and that encourages respect for the neighbor, and that promotes peace. But we know how easily legitimate authority can be misdirected by those who use power for themselves or who are intimidated by unruly and hostile force. We ask your blessing now on those who have been chosen by us as law enforcement officials here and who will speak to us now. Give them wisdom and courage as they perform their duties in a fallen and broken world, for at times their lives are at risk on our behalf. And now may the food nourish our bodies, and the speeches and the conversation inform our minds. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you all for coming. I especially want to thank our guests, our guest presenters, Sheriff Wright, Chief Adams, and Sheriff McCormick for coming here to do a real unusual opportunity for us, to provide a real unusual opportunity for us to have the three chief law enforcement officers that are responsible for Hot Springs Village law enforcement to be here on the panel, and it's your opportunity. And I hope if you have law enforcement questions, if you have concerns that you would like to comment on, or if you have specific questions you would like to ask, that we'll have a panel Q&A time after each of the guests has an opportunity to speak for up to 10 minutes. If someone doesn't want to take their whole 10-minute time, and I would encourage you to take it if you want to, please do. But if you don't, that'll just leave more time at the end for a more prolonged Q&A opportunity for you as the audience with our law enforcement officials. Gary Adams is going to be first to take the microphone. He is our chief of police for Hot Springs Village. It's been about roughly a year and a half, something like that. 16 months. Previously, he's been a chief of police in Texarkana, Arkansas, and in University Park, Texas, and for quite a long time. You were chief of police in Texarkana for 25 plus years, right? Or you were there for 25 plus years? Okay, and then
It was a Texas.
Texas side, okay. And 13 years, 6 months were you chief of police the whole time for the city of University Park, Texas? Used to be the president of the Texas Police Chiefs Association for a period of time, and that and numerous other honors. If you go to his LinkedIn page, which is where I got this, you can see that information. So I'm going to ask you, Chief, if you want to speak for about 10 minutes and tell us what thoughts you have for us.
Thank you. First thing I want to do is I'm going to promise you that there'll be no singing on my part. But I did enjoy the song. I think maybe one of the sheriffs may sing, but it won't be me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I always enjoy getting out and meeting community, members of the community, and being able to talk. I'm a little bit nervous talking in front of these two sheriffs, and I'll tell you why. If you understand how the police department in the university, in Hot Springs Village works, I am hired by the POA as a police chief, but I get my authority through these two sheriffs. In other words, I'm a deputy for this sheriff and for this sheriff. That's where we get our arrest powers in the village. We are law enforcement officers in the state of Arkansas, but that's how the system works. They don't call me and ask me to do anything, and well, we do respond to calls, but they don't call me personally and ask me to report to them or anything like that, but they do grace us with the power to make arrests. I've got some numbers with me that I'll kind of run through. Like my introduction said, I've been in law enforcement 40 years this year. In March it'll be 40 years. So I started when I was 5 or 6. Actually, I started at the age of 21 in Texarkana. Worked my way up through the ranks, and in 1993 I was appointed their police chief. In the last 7 years that I worked there, I served as the chief for Texarkana. We had a 25-year retirement program there through the Texas Municipal Retirement System. I did not retire, but I was ready to move on for a new challenge, and I applied for the position at University Park and received it, and enjoyed working there for almost 14 years, 13 and a half years. It's similar to a gated community, except the state won't let them put the gates up on two major highways at one time, but it's gated on two sides. If you're familiar with Dallas at all, it's gated on one side, on the west side by the toll road, and it's gated on the east side by the Highway 75, or what they call the Central Expressway. And then to the south of us is a little shabby town called Highland Park. And they had their own walls over there. And then, of course, SMU. Anybody from SMU? Anybody graduate from SMU? You know the area. Fine school there, Southern Methodist University. Been located there actually before the city, and a great school, growing, and that whole campus changed during my 14 years there. And it's also the home of the latest presidential, it's not a library, they call it the Presidential Center. George W. Bush's Presidential Center is on SMU's campus. And I got the opportunity to work with the university on that project. and the committee on selecting the security agency that guards the President's Library, Art Center. I said earlier that these guys don't call on me, but they do. The sheriff's office understands and we understand, and it's a working relationship, and it's necessary, and I'm glad that both of these new guys that came on board agree with it, for us to assist them in order, and them to assist us. So, if we get a call outside the gate, east gate, west gate, within a reasonable distance, we do respond. Now, what is the definition of reasonable distance? It depends on what type of call we're responding to. If Jessieville School has something going down, we're going to go assist the sheriff's office. If Walmart has a fighting shoplifter on their hands, we're going to go and hold and stand by until Garland County gets there. On the other side, same thing for Saline County. There's some businesses over there. They're quite far from Saline, where most of the deputies are, kept busy. And so we're responding, patrolling areas out there. Unfortunately, we don't catch anybody out there very often, because they do steal and break into things, but we are out there. And then if we need help, the sheriff's office does, they will come in. And we certainly are a small agency. We're not specialized really in any certain area. So if we need specialization, such as assistance on a homicide investigation, a major crime of some sort, we will call the sheriff's office or the Arkansas State Police, depending on who. But first we will call the sheriff's office. Just a little bit more about me. I'm married. My wife is a retired nurse. She was a nurse for 38 years. She's my doctor. The only thing she can't do is prescribe the medicine, and I wish she could do that for me. But she is not working. She's living here at the house. She's miserable. I can tell you. I would think most of the people in this room are retired, not all. But I think you have to find something to do once you retire. And she just hadn't found her niche yet. But we live over on the east side, right off of Lake Balboa. And we're very happy living in the village. And we're ready for things to settle down. Our first year, 16 months has been kind of interesting, to say the least, as far as it goes. We raised 5 kids, and we have 14 grandkids. The youngest one is about 6 months old. The oldest one is 20. So we've got a big spread. And Christmas at my house is expensive, but it takes me about a year to pay for each Christmas, you know. And I give her a limit. I said, this is all you can spend, and you got to, stay within the limit. So we have great kids, and they're all of them but one here in Texarkana that our son lives in. A little town north of Plano called Melissa, Texas. I don't know where Melissa's at. No, 75. McKinney, yeah, that's correct. I have a master's degree in business from Texas A&M University, a little small college down in Texas. And let me tell you about Texas. It is, as you know, it's a big place. And as the president of the Texas Police Chiefs Association, my gosh, I mean, we're talking about 154 counties. And we never even saw anybody from El Paso during our association, or meetings, or conference, or anything. They all kind of claim to be from New Mexico, which is a big state. We're a very diverse state. But I was glad to leave, and I was glad to get to Arkansas, and I really enjoyed it here. It's a beautiful place to live, and that's why I'm here. Spent all my life, childhood in Arkansas, doing fishing, hunting, lake, learned how to water ski down there. We call it Lake Narrows. I think we call it something else now. Just north of Nashville. That's where my wife is from, Nashville, Arkansas. Our department has 18 sworn officers to cover the entire village. That's less me is 17. So, plus I wear a uniform, and if the guys need some help, I get out and assist. Now, I'm 61 years old, so I'm not quite the guy, man, I was when I was 21 years old. So I try to be there to help the guys and fill in. but I am a police officer and I will answer calls. If you know anything about the village, you know that we're about 55 square miles of land mass. It's huge. And we have about 24,000 plus acres of forest land. Got some houses in there, about 8,500 households or so. Population a little over 20,000. 530 miles of roadway. And, you know, and then we've got our freeway running right through the center, DeSoto Boulevard, which is not quite wide enough for a freeway, but, and please don't drive off the shoulders because there's no guardrails on that road. So, on the average, we have 2 to 3 officers on duty. So, you know, if you got one on the east side, one on the west side, and something goes on in the middle, it's going to take us a little while to get there. But we do work at making sure that we cover everything. And if we can't, we call for help or backup from someone. I won't go into a lot of detail. I just want to let you know that since I've been here, the agency, we have adopted the Arkansas Association of Chiefs of Police best practice policies. The policy handbook here was pretty outdated. I like to consider myself fairly progressive. I came from 2 agencies that were very progressive. University Park became a nationally accredited agency through CALEA. While I was a police chief there, I was tasked with getting that done. We had 445 standards that we had to work under. We don't have quite that many in Arkansas, thank goodness, but we are trying to recognize the agency more, bring it more into line with what the rest of the police agencies across the country are doing as far as their best practices and policies. That includes everything from hiring to how we patrol, to how we work crimes, and you name it. There's policies for that. In my first year, we applied for 2 grants. We were fortunate to get a grant for $25,000, the first grant the police department ever received or applied for, because we're not a governmental entity. So I was worked with Senator Sample and Representative Westerman. Got letters of support from them, submitted our application, worked with the JPs in the village, and we did receive 1 of the 2 grants, and we bought equipment with those. We hope to get some more grant money, but we realize that as a new grantee, we're probably taking a little bit of money out of some of these other guys' grants. So, you know, we could have asked for $120,000. We didn't. We just wanted to ask for our little cut, so we were able to get 1. Hopefully we'll get another one this coming year. We've started the Citizen Police Academy just to improve the relationship between the police department and the residents, and to give the residents more information and idea what we do, what we can do, and what we can't do. If you haven't attended, please do. We hold it twice a year, April and August. It's 1 night a week for 6 weeks for 2 hours a night, and we cover everything that goes on in the police department. As far as investigations, we don't talk about particular investigations or what we're doing in those investigations, but we tell you how we investigate, how we patrol, how we hire, everything about the police department you might ever want to know. And we've had 2 classes, 25 the first time, 29 the second time. We hold it to 25, try to, and it's been very successful and very popular, and we're going to continue to do that. Just promoted 2 people this last couple of months. Have a new lieutenant, Gary Vaughn, who's been with the department for a number of years. Is now a lieutenant, promoted from sergeant. He's over support services. And I promoted a officer to sergeant just this week. Steve Costello, who's one of the Hot Springs residents, was a heck of an investigator, and we're glad to have him in the command staff. Of course, those are not new positions. Those are positions that were left vacant by retirement, so we've had some people leave since I've been here. Not because of me, but... And that's about it. I'd be glad to answer questions. We're going to do that after the fact.
We're going to do that after.
Okay. Any questions you've got, please remember to ask me. Thank you very much.
Those of you who followed the last the 2014 election very closely know that in Saline County, they had a very competitive field of slate of candidates, a race. Rodney Wright had, how many, were there seven candidates for sheriff, and it made it quite interesting. And I went to Rodney's Facebook page and looked at some of his information that he had there. You retired from the Benton Police Department? Benton?
Yeah, City of Benton.
City of Benton Police Department, 20 years. What I like best, though, that I found on his page was a photo, it's in black and white, on his Facebook page of at election at the watch party, and he's got a little girl wrapped around him, hugging him, and Rodney wrote, "There are several photos taken last night at the watch party, but this one has to be one of my favorites. She is definitely a daddy's girl. Thank you again for trusting me with your vote." And that's addressed to all those who voted for him. "I won't let you down." And that last part, Sheriff Wright, is what I especially like. The Saline County Sheriff's Department has had its share, or more than its fair share, of issues and misconduct and alleged and some scandal, and so we're looking for a much happier experience during Sheriff Wright's leadership. And go ahead and take about 10 minutes if you like and tell us.
Thank you. And it was a very interesting election year, and I see Ron and Vicki Fritz here, great supporters and friends, and thank you very much. Just real quick, after the primary, about a week later, I was talking to Ron, and I said, I won that one, I've got one more to go. And he said, "Well, you barely won that one." And I said, "Well, okay." And he said, "Almost the exact same amount of people that voted for you voted against you. And there's a reason for that. They wanted, he said about half voted for you because they knew you and that they knew that you could do the job. But about the other half wanted something new. Wanted a fresh change, not someone from Saline County, not somebody from basically the good old boy system." And I listened to him, and it was good advice. And so when I was, after getting past the primaries and had the general election coming up, one of my main goals were to find a good chief deputy. Because, and Mike will tell you, one of the hardest things about being a new sheriff is surrounding yourself with good people and choosing your staff. Because you've got to choose it very wisely, because you have to have loyalty. And you have to have good experienced people. It's all about surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you. And I hope that's what Mike did, that's what I did. And chief deputy was the next position that needed to be filled at our department. And so I went out and I looked for somebody, not from Saline County, not from Arkansas. The gentleman that I hired is actually he was born and raised in upstate New York, and I actually brought him from San Francisco. So he's been all over the place. He retired from the DEA January the 10th with 28 years. He has 31 years of law enforcement experience. And this gentleman, and the reason I'm touting him is because I think it's important that you know, one of the first things that I did was go out and find someone just to feel that need, that we all needed somebody with, somebody new, fresh, new perspective. And this gentleman supplied that. He did his first stint at the DEA in Winter Rock he did about 6 years here. So that's his connection with Arkansas. And I was introduced to him by who is now the new colonel of state police, Bill Bryant, who was in the DEA. But let me fast forward real quick, but he's been all over the world, Afghanistan, Iraq, DC. He's now living in Hot Springs, and he's my chief deputy. His name's Jay Fitzpatrick, and I will bring him to one of the events and let him introduce himself, and I can tell you a little bit. But again, I brought someone that's not from around here so that I could have a good, clean perspective. And I wanted to let you know that. I'll let everything go across his desk before it gets to mine, which is nice, because he didn't know a soul at that sheriff's office, and they don't, which is good. He didn't know anybody that we're hiring. He looks at it fresh. One of the things that we did at the sheriff's office. So because of what the gentleman said about the kind of the dark cloud that was hanging over our department that we've had, I didn't want to catch anybody, but I wanted to make sure that the public knew that we were going to start off fresh. And what I mean by that is day 2, which because the first day was a holiday, which was on that Friday morning, and everyone showed up to work, all 110 employees took a drug test, including myself, my chief deputy, everybody. We have an on-staff nurse there from an outside facility that we use. And again, I didn't do it to catch anyone. I did it to show the public that we are a good department. And I'm glad to say, happy to say, all 110 passed. So me and Mike talked about that during the thing that it was a good way to start out the year. And it was a good way to show the department that we weren't going to tolerate anything like that. So that we were going to have random drug tests throughout the year. And so, again, it was a very, very good thing to have 110 people pass it. One of the things we talked about just last night at our quorum court finance meeting was what I'm wearing right now. Our department, and again, it goes back to perception is reality and how people perceive us. We've had some bad past. It's not quite over. We've got court and trial coming up here pretty soon on some of it. But we want to be more professional, and in order for that, you have to look professional. You can't look like you're going to change someone's oil and you're a police officer. I mean, I'm sorry, that's what some of the guys look like, and they understand that what I'm trying to do. So we went to a more professional Class A uniform. Mr. Zahn helped us out with that, being on the quorum court. Thank you for that. And again, we're not asking for a lot more money as far as staffing, but what we're doing is we're trying to make do with what we have. And what is that is we're taking officers who are normally going out in plain clothes and we're putting them in uniforms. It's just adding to the visibility. It's a force multiplier without adding any new people. We're taking our warrants officers, our civil processing guys who are out serving papers. And they've been driving white, unmarked cars. Well, we've marked them all. We put them in uniform. One of the things that we heard during the campaign is we never see enough police cars. We don't see them out in our neighborhoods or our communities. If we did, you just didn't know it because they were probably a warrants vehicle or a civil process vehicle. Because we only have 5 deputies at a time patrolling the whole county. So you take these guys that are working Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, you mark their cars, you put them in uniforms. That increases our force multiplier without adding any new people. And again, when it goes back to having only 5 deputies for the whole county, you can imagine trying to respond from East End to Perry, how long that takes. Some of the other things that we've done, going back to surrounding yourself with good people, I sat down with the entire department, and I told them, here's my goals, here's where I want us to go, and I want you to just give me a chance, give me the opportunity, and to get on board. Not everybody did. And so, and some people have decided that, I can't support some of the changes he's making, and they moved on, which I respect that, and I'm glad. So we've had a few employee changes as far as in the following ranks, but it's for the good. I think our department's heading in the right direction. And again, the people that are there now, they know what we're wanting, our goal. They know where we want to go, and they're willing to stick with us. A couple of things that the department's doing in the future. Well, we had a meeting last month. We had all the heads of law enforcement in Saline County met, and our first meeting was in the village. We brought every chief, sheriff, FBI was there, prosecuting attorney's office was there, Benton, Bryant, Haskell, Chief Adams. But we're having these meetings once a month. Springs, all heads of law enforcement in Hot Springs Village, but not Hot Springs PD chief was there. And Mike, I want to invite you to the next one because we border them, and our criminals are the same ones that are robbing us are robbing you. And so I want to invite you to the next meeting. But again, it's about bringing the law enforcement heads in one room so that we can sit and we can talk and discuss what's going on in our individual areas. But again, we're talking about the same problems, and a lot of times we're talking about the same people. One of the things that the Hot Springs PD Chief Flores brought up in our meeting was that maybe on an opposite week we have all of our heads of our criminal investigation divisions meet and go over the crimes that are going on. Again, because a lot of times we're dealing with the same people. So that's something that we're going to get into. But again, meeting with all the heads, it goes back to cooperation, and that's what I preached during my campaign, that we're going to make sure that we have cooperation within Saline County and then with the surrounding counties. And with that, I'm going to let Mike talk so we don't run out of time. There you go.
Just a very brief introduction. Did you get that all? All counter and Toastmasters. You got it, didn't you, Shane? Michael McCormick, Sheriff McCormick, did something this election, last year when he ran, that was very unusual and was very historic. And one of the things that you might think of is he ran as an independent candidate. He didn't wear a party label in the race. Never, to my knowledge, and I did a little checking, to my knowledge that had never been done before successfully in the state of Arkansas, in any county. So one with about roughly 60-40%, and had a very competitive sheriff's race in Garland County as well. Nearly as many candidates, almost as many candidates as you had Sheriff Wright in Saline County. Has been started in law enforcement in the Sheriff's Department, I believe, as a jailer, and moved up the ranks and held most of the positions that are available to be held in the Sheriff's Department, not sheriff at that time. Moved to the police department and the Hot Springs Police Department, and rose to the ranks of captain, and even served a period of time as interim chief of police for the City of Hot Springs Police Department. So please now welcome our new Sheriff McCormick.
It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to report to you some of the things that we've had going on in Garland County over the last month and a few days. And it's been a busy time. It's been a very busy time, probably the busiest time of my life. After being elected sheriff, it became very apparent to me that within Garland County, and especially within the Sheriff's Department, we were a very reactive department. And we were reactive because of the tremendous workload and the tremendous call volume that we were responding to. It had actually gotten to the point where in our criminal investigation division, unless it was a very serious crime, we did a lot of paper shuffling. Within the patrol division, we were under such a call volume that it was taking everything that we could do just to respond to the calls. And we weren't actually focused like we should have in solving the calls. Or criminal investigation division solving the crimes. We had to reshape the way we were operating. And that's a work in progress at this point in time. I'm working real hard to get more patrol deputies out on the street. I'm working real hard to get more criminal investigators within the CID division. But probably just as important, we're trying to retrain our staff to work more efficiently, more effectively. We're working much more hand in hand with the prosecutor's office. And we've already seen a huge difference when it comes to presenting our cases in court. We've got another huge asset within Garland County that should be opening up in the next 3 or 4 months, and that's the new detention center. which is out on Albert Pike, Highway 270 West. It's a $43 million facility. And it's utilizing a form of supervision that many people are not aware of. It's called direct supervision. We have 8 pods at the operation center, and each pod is manned by one person, and there's 64 prisoners in each pod. We maintain behavior by rewarding good behavior and taking privileges away from poor behavior. And this is a proven method that is growing widely in the United States. And we will have one of the shining stars in Garland County for the whole United States when the facility opens in a few months. I also, as Sheriff Wright said, surrounded myself with some outstanding people. I've got 2 chief deputies. One is Jason Lawrence. He was a court administrator before coming over to the Sheriff's Department, and he's got quite a bit of law enforcement experience. And I was fortunate that the other chief deputy, Mark Chamberlain, was brought in as the detention chief deputy. He's got a great deal of experience, and he actually comes from South Florida. Direct supervision is like nothing that I've ever worked with before, and most people have not. So I think you'll see some tremendous improvements and some tremendous decreases in crime in our vicinity because of the new facility and the way it's operating. Once again, it's been an extremely busy month, a very trying month. We've got a great bunch of deputy sheriffs and civilian staff at the Garland County Sheriff's Department. We are making every effort to respond to every single call and do follow-up investigations on every single theft or crime that occurs. That was one of the biggest things that I heard during the campaign, that the people were not getting the service that they wanted. But make no mistake about it, it's all a team effort. Not just the law enforcement agencies working together, which we do. We work very, very well together. But it's a team effort with the communities working together, the people in the community. And the more involvement that we get, the safer the community that we'll have. We are also going to be starting a citizen police academy at Garland County here in the next few months. And I would encourage you to keep your eyes open in the newspaper, and when you see that opportunity, please jump on that. Once again, we've got a lot of great things going on at the Sheriff's Department, and we want to share. And we want to have as transparent an operation as we possibly can. I've been in law enforcement for a little over 30 years, and one of the keys to my success is transparency. And we're going to continue that at the Sheriff's Department. We're going to be very proactive on providing information to the public. I don't want a situation where reporters are coming to us. I want to get that information out to them before they even ask for it. I'll keep this short, and I'm looking forward to answering any kind of questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, we have a good window of time available for your questions, and or if you want to express a concern and ask for a comment on your concern, would be another approach that you're welcome to take. And I'm looking for a hand.
Here.
Yeah, my question actually is for all of you. My guess is that most of the your activation of service is through the 9/11 service. That's just my guess. I could be wrong. But how do you all handle that as far as the coordination between the sheriff's office, Hot Springs Village, Hot Springs, and/or Benton Police? Because you got sheriff's jurisdiction. Are there jurisdiction rules in this case, or who the 9/11 people call? And I'll give that to any of you to answer.
Well, you can all take a stab at it if you like. Keep the mic and then pass it down.
All right. that we're doing in Saline County, just make sure I clarify your question. You're talking about when someone calls 911,
Yeah,
as far as who responds and,
yeah,
okay, and if there's jurisdiction issues?
yeah.
Well, we all know our boundaries, but for the sheriff's office, one of the things that we do is we have been in the past and we're about to do is we deputize the agencies within our county. And we do that so that they can come assist us right outside of their city limits, or if they're following a violator. And we don't want there to be an issue of, well, you've gone outside your jurisdiction, and now you no longer can stop that person who's intoxicated, or you no longer can do certain things. And so, but it's more of a mutual aid. And so, in the past, we've always been deputized when I worked for the city. And right now, the only ones that we've had deputized so far are our narcotics and highway interdiction officers, so that there's no problem when they're going down the highway within Saline County. But eventually, we'll get around to deputizing everybody in Saline County, the law enforcement, so that we don't have that issue. If someone needs help, then they'll come and assist. But it's not a common. I mean, most agencies handle their business within their area. But if it does happen that they need help, then they're covered.
Does the 911 call center go, I mean, obviously they got a number they call.
Well, we've actually got 3 call centers in Saline County. Brown's got their own, Saline County Sheriff's Office has got their own, and the PD's got their own. So a lot of times it depends on which tower you hit on your cell phone, and which is something that we've already talked about kind of to address. Because if your cell phone hits and it goes to Saline County, but now you're traveling through the city, you're gonna get transferred, and that takes time. It takes time for people to respond. It could be as simple as needing needing an ambulance. Same thing. Depends on which tower it hits, is who picks up your call, and that's a problem that we have with having three 911 centers in Saline County. A lot of times you get transferred around 2 or 3 times before you get to the one that can help you. And so that's an issue that we are looking at, but that's going to take a lot of cooperation.
Does that facilitate the time if you tell them when you call 911 that you have an emergency problem and you are in the village? Does that help?
Well, that's a good question. Well, if you're out, now do y'all have your own dispatch? Okay. They have their own dispatch in the village, but some of the calls still come to our Saline County dispatch. I think the majority come to y'all, do they not? Okay. So a lot of them just go straight to there. So I guess we have 4.
So you don't have to drag that across your lap when we move it over here.
In answer to your question and kind of follow up on yours, 911 was a great idea. It just came out a little bit late. 911 is the system which allows us to have your landline locked into our CAD system, so that when we make a call to 911, if it's an emergency, we automatically know where that call is coming from, because it populates a field on the computer in front of the dispatcher. Well, I was told the other day, and Judge Zahn was there, Garland County, about 80% of telephone usage now is cellular. So most people have no longer got a landline. And the cellular system, what it has done is made it a little bit more difficult for us to determine who's making the call, where the call's coming from, because that's not populated when that call comes in. Depending on where you're at, depends on, as the sheriff says, where your call hits a tower. And they've got enough towers up now that that's not really as big of an issue as it was when sales first came out, because they've done a lot of work of the phone companies with the requirement of the FCC and the federal government, which enables law enforcement and emergency response teams to locate somebody quicker when they need help than what we used to do. They've about got it down to where it's within 10 miles or so, I think. And there's some federal legislation out there to try to get something done. I don't know what it's called. I think it's called PR 25. Can't recall. But anyway, it will enable us to actually get that information quicker and maybe be able to determine where you're at better. Our police department has a dispatch center. All of our 911 calls, I think on both sides of the county, if I'm not mistaken, go through Garland County. It rings into Garland County's PSAP. It's actually ours. It rings into there, and it automatically routes it, it's a computer, to Hot Springs PD. That's the way I understand it works. So when you call 911 in the village, that call actually goes to Garland County Sheriff's Office and back. But there's no issue with time because we get the call pretty quick when we make the dispatch. So to answer your question as far as 911, that's how we determine where the calls need to be. I mean, if you call 911 in the village off a landline, that's going to go to our PSAP and we're going to dispatch. If you call it off your cell phone, we're not really sure where it's going to hit first, but it will eventually get to us. One of the things I've been tasked with in the village is to look into seeing if one of the two counties would take over our communication system. We're still in the very early stages of discussing this. We had a large meeting last week. The judge forgot to pick me up, so I was late, but at Garland County at the emergency management. There's just a lot of questions that we still have to answer, whether or not it can be done. Garland County's taken on this task for us. I think Saline County's, I don't think you guys are, because you're not getting any 911 money anyway. But with the decrease in the usage of landlines, we've seen a tremendous amount of loss in revenue in the 911 funds that you pay your 85-cent surcharge for that service. That's gone down tremendously, so that's going to affect a lot of communications and a lot of issues. Yes, ma'am.
What about Smart 911? I hardly ever meet anyone that has done that work. You just go online and put all your information, and does it populate when it comes into your, because Saline County was one of the early ones wanting to do that.
It does, but you gotta be willing to go out and do the work, you know, as far as getting people to sign up for it.
Oh, and they're not interested.
And they're, yeah, we did it at the city, and they're just, it's a good system, and it's a good thought process, but people they just didn't get behind it.
Does it not show the location?
Yes, it
either?
does.
Oh, it does?
It does.
Wow.
But there again, you're signing up for it, and you're giving all your information, you know, where you're at, what might be your medical situation. It gives a lot of information, but it just didn't.
It kind of pared it down because you have to re-enroll every 6 months.
Yeah. They were trying to get it to where it would go longer, you know, maybe every year, so that people didn't want to keep getting that information out. Is what we found out. So it didn't go very well at all.
In Garland County, I guess there's 3 911 centers. I would count the village as one, even though it's kind of a remote setup. The Hot Springs Police Department's got a 911 dispatch, and the Sheriff's Department has a 911. And all the calls come in there, whether it be for law enforcement purposes or for medical purposes. And we dispatch the call. We either dispatch law enforcement or we send the call to the medical provider, so they in turn send medical help to those that are needing it.
Question?
I actually have 2 questions. One for Chief Adams and one for Sheriff Wright. I'll ask both of them, and then y'all can answer them in order, any order you choose. First of all, for Chief Adams, I would like you to comment, give your opinion on the newly painted bike paths that run along DeSoto Boulevard. I would like your perspective on that in terms of what the requirements are for a bike path in the state, whether or not they're wide enough, how you feel about it in terms of safety, and how you feel about it in terms of liability to the village? And I would like you to answer that directly, not politically, if you don't mind. And for Sheriff Wright, I'd like you to, and by the way, I just gotta throw this in because our son went to work for Sheriff Wright in the year 2000 as a new police officer in Benton. And so I've known Rodney for 15 years. That was 15 years ago. And at the time, Rodney was our son's supervisor as a corporal or a sergeant, whatever he was back in those days. I know he was a young boy, in my opinion. Of course, everybody is. But the bottom line is, Rodney is a class act. For those of you that supported him, please continue to. For some reason, they have to run for sheriff every 2 years, which is ludicrous, in my opinion, that they have to spend the resources and the time running when they could be enforcing the law. But in any event, Rodney, I'd like you to comment on what you believe right now is the most serious criminal aspect in Saline County and what you're doing to help curb it.
Well, Chief Adams, I think Ron's trying to get you in trouble with the general manager.
I'm used to that. In answer to your question, I don't know if the law does have a specific width for bicycle lanes. What I do know about Arkansas Traffic Code is that bicycles are allowed to use the roadway unless it's a controlled access highway like the interstate. So you can have bicycle traffic on any road in the state of Arkansas. I'm not an attorney, so I can't answer your question about liability, but they have put up some bike lanes that are rather narrow, and they put them up on the busiest road through the village, the main road through the village. And there are a lot of blind areas, a lot of blind spots. Whether we have those there or not, and I had no decision in that, I want to clarify that. But whether we have those or not, if there's a bicycle on the roadway and you're a motorist, you have to approach that bicycle safely and yield to that bicycle. If they're in front, right in the center of that lane, there's nothing we can do about that. They're a legal vehicle on the lane. They're not really a motor vehicle, but they're legal on the highway or the streets. I think the only time you're really going to see those used a lot, I have seen them being used some, is probably when those bicycle triathlons and whatever they're called come through, and they're probably used, and they usually have a lot of people out for those to keep, give advance warning and try to keep all the cyclists safe. I know that Jason Temple, the Public Works Director, has plans to, I don't know when this is going to be done, but to extend those shoulders on those roads, especially on DeSoto, to give that bike lane 2 more feet on each side or wherever it's at. They realize that they're narrow, and they realize that they need to be a little bit wider. And we've got such an overlay on DeSoto that if you run off the edge of the roadway and try to correct it, you're going to do nothing but flip your car and go down the side of a hill. So they need to do that, in my opinion. In my opinion, that's more of an issue than the bicycles. So, but they are working on it. Does that help you?
Yes, sir, it does. I mean, in the village, I think that a lot of us villagers think that white line on the right side of the road, I think we think that the tire has to be on the other side of that line.
Only if there's a bicycle in that line, okay?
Rodney? Oh. No, it's okay. Well, in Saline County, and then I'm sure it's the same in Garland County, our number one issue is narcotics. Everything revolves back to it. All of our thefts revolve back to it. We recently made a pretty good arrest on a guy who was stealing generators and trailers, and we found him in a hotel room in Hot Springs. What he was doing, he was coming to Saline County and stealing and going and selling them all over the state, and it was just to buy narcotics. He lived in a hotel room. So he wasn't doing it to support his family. He wasn't doing it to raise kids. He was doing it just to do drugs. So everything revolves around drugs. And so one of the things that we're doing is we have two new narcotic officers at our department, and my chief deputy being ex-DEA, we reached out to the DEA. He's got connections, obviously, and so we reached out to them and we asked about their drug task force. Well, they're full. They didn't have any spots open. But we told them how interested we were and that we were wanting to get involved. And so we were very pleased, the head of the DEA in Little Rock went and found us a spot. They went and robbed one from another department, actually, because the way it's set up is they'll only allow X number throughout the state or throughout the country. And so you find one that someone's not using, and I think that was in New Orleans, that they weren't using a spot, so that we went and robbed it and brought it to Little Rock. And so we now have a spot. And so this will be the first time in the Sheriff's Office history that we'll have someone in the DEA task force. He starts up there probably next week, week after, depending on the paperwork. At the same time, that leaves us with one, because we're going to send that guy to that task force. So it leaves us with one. Right now, we're trying to move some money around that we have, and hopefully, with Mr. Zahn's help, we're going to get us another position. But in the meanwhile, what we did is we partnered with the city of Benton. The city of Benton has a narcotics unit, and they have, I think, 5. So we're partnering with them because our one guy can't do anything by himself. And so it goes back to what I preached during the election, cooperation. We're going to join with them, and that would give us 6. Hopefully we'll have another one that'll give us 7. The next phase is we're going to get with Bryant. Hopefully they can add a couple to it. And we have one group or one task force just in Saline County working on a problem. Because it doesn't matter if it's in the city of Benton or the city of Bryant or out in the county. It's just, we're all talking about the same people. And so that's where we're going right now.
Okay, we can let the Garland County Sheriff comment on that same question if you'd like to.
Thank you. I would agree with Rodney. The drug problem, in particular in Garland County, is the meth labs that we've got, and it seems like we're dealing with them more and more every day. And all you have to do is open up the paper, and you can see it's covered up with crime. And once again, 90+% of all that crime is directly related to the drug issues that are going on around the country. We're working hard. Every law enforcement agency is working hard. But we've got to expand our efforts beyond enforcement. I think education, I think treatment is a big part of it. I mean, we've got to look at the entire picture. And we're joining up with the various forces also within Garland County. Once again, you know, it is a big team effort, and we're running into a roadblock a lot of times with the enforcement efforts because there's no place to actually incarcerate the convicted drug offenders. So a lot of times they're released. So one of the things that we're going to include in our new detention center is a pretty intensive treatment program. So we're hoping that makes a big difference also.
Okay, who else has a question?
I've got the question regarding your patrol of Highway 7 on the trash pickup, that you have the, I guess they're prisoners that pick up the trash there. Can you tell us a little bit about that program and how often it's utilized?
Sure, I'd be glad to. In fact, I just got the monthly report for January this morning. We've got 2 deputies that are assigned to litter patrol. One of the deputies picked up with his crew, and they're work release, public service type people that work with the deputies, picked up 2,200 pounds of litter. This is not including going to various dump sites and picking up washing machines, couches, and such. We've got one of the guys is strictly funded through state money, and he works on state highways. He works on the Martin Luther King Expressway, 270, 70, doing that. And we actually get reimbursed for that. I mean, it is discouraging. I don't know if Garland County leads the way in litter, but it sure seems like it at times. Those guys and their crews are kept busy full-time picking up trash, and we could easily double the effort and still not really get a handle. We were talking the other day about focusing more towards enforcement efforts. It seems like a lot of people consider their truck bed as a trash can, and the way they empty it is drive down the expressway. I mean, that's littering just as though you threw it out the window. So we do have room in improving our litter enforcement. We talked about getting cameras, setting up cameras in certain locations. I don't know, is anybody familiar with Walkway out around Marion Anderson? It's probably one of the trashiest pieces of road in Garland County. It just so happens it's about 3/4 of a mile from McDonald's, 3/4 of a mile from Sonic, and you'll see all the litter throughout that road coming from those two areas. But no, it's an area I think, I'm passionate about it, and we're going to keep our efforts going, and if the resources come available, I'd love to see it increase.
What about putting up some good signs, like they do in California, that there's a fine?
Tori, just a second. Well, I'll go ahead and take two questions, one from Tori and one from George, and then we'll come back.
I was just thinking maybe, when I was younger, I was one of those that didn't think much about throwing something out the window too, but California got pretty strict and started putting out signs, and it just reminded you, and then of course there was a fine if you got, if someone took your license plate. But I was wondering if we couldn't, conjure up some money for some signs on littering and some consequences to following up on it if people were caught actually throwing out anything, or like you say, litter flying out of the back of a truck. But I was just thinking that might be something to remind people on, hey, this is a beautiful country. Let's not, garbage it up with garbage.
Mike, glad to see you, buddy. The issue with the detention center and the rehabilitation component, I mean, that's primarily certainly a volunteer, a community effort. Do you have any plans to perhaps have a coordinator for that? Because we don't have any funds for that in our budgets, but we've used a number of civic organizations, churches and that. Have you thought about having a coordinator for that to bring all those groups together? Because we have a lot of people that will minister or will assist or will work to rehabilitate with those folks. We just don't have money, and that was one of the things we talked about during the election, the campaign to get the jail passed. So, how are you moving in that direction, and how many groups do you maybe have that you have lined up to work now?
Okay. And we'll share the mic here so you all too, but Tori's question first maybe?
I think the signs would be an excellent idea. Anything we can do to encourage people not to litter, I'm in favor of it, and we do everything within my power to do that. We actually do have a programs director at the new detention center, and she will be organizing all the programs within that. We're focusing towards mental health issues, we're focusing towards a lot of drug abuse issues, we're focusing towards education issues. So this is a growing thing within the detention center, and as it opens up, I would expect to see it change and become more focused in areas. And some of the programs that we're going to do are not going to be as effective as other programs. So one thing that is great about the 3/8% sales tax is that we have got some decent funding for the detention center, and that includes the treatment area of the detention center. It's going to be a great community resource.
Thank you. Chief, do you have anything on that?
I don't have anything at all on the detention center. I just want to say that residents in the village are very, very volunteer-minded, and I appreciate the fact that so many of y'all get out and pick up some of the trash on the side of our roads, because we don't have prisoners bringing you to do that. But that is a good way to serve your community, and we see a lot of that in our community. I see them up down the roads all the time. Most of them are women. But my hat's off to you. I appreciate your service to the community.
Chief Wright. Sheriff Wright.
Addressing your question about the jail, I've recently found out that we used to have a ministry program at our jail. The past jail administrator did away with it. I don't know if not sure exactly why he did, but he did. And I will tell you, and I was going to let Mike know this too. Back in November, before the general election, I went down to Cummings. My church that I attend, they go down there about every 3 months. And I got invited to go, and I can tell you I didn't want to go. Being in law enforcement, that's not what I wanted to be surrounded by. But I went with them. There was about 13 of us that went down to Cummings, and we went into this room. There was about 300 inmates, and they're all in white. So we were dressed just in, bright colored clothes, and they asked us to scatter out amongst the 300 inmates. And I'm thinking, this is not a good place for me. And but we go, and the guy at our church who organizes all this, he gets up, and of course they all know him because he comes quite frequently. He said, I want to introduce my guest. And I'm thinking, oh my. And I talked to one of the other guys, and we done made a plan that I was going to just be a carpenter. Because I do construction on the side, so that's what I was going to be when they introduced me. So the gentleman went through the room, and he as he went back, he got to where I was, and he didn't say my name. He went to the guy behind me. I'm thinking, surely he saw me. Everyone's in white here, and I'm in this colored shirt. Gets all the way to the end. He says, now I saved someone. I want to introduce you to someone that I saved, special. And I'm thinking, oh no. And he says, we've got a gentleman with us who is currently, or if it goes right, he's going to be the next sheriff of Saline County. And he pointed to me and said, this is who he is. The guy sitting right next to him, he says, well, that's where I'm from. That's who sent me here. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, I'm Saline County sent me down here. And I said, well, okay. I'm not the sheriff yet, but everyone in there then knew that I was in law enforcement and that I was possibly going to be the next sheriff. Very awkward. We went through the service. I know I'm kind of babbling on about this, but it was a good point. We went through it. It was about an hour long. Had worship, sang, and I met the gentleman who ran that program. And at the end of the program, they brought us all up front, and they wanted us to be up there just to talk to the inmates, as they come out. And you got to understand, they had to be willing to be a part of this program, and they had to give up a lot to be a part of this program. They had to give up, TV. They had to give up. There was no magazines. There was no nothing like that. There's a lot that they had to give up to be a part of it because it was a process of fellowshipping, but also they were teaching them, Microsoft Word and so forth, trying to help them out. It's an 18-month process. At the end of it, I met some good people, and about 70 or so came up to me and wished me luck and said, if we could vote, we'd vote for you. We can't. So, but we appreciate you coming here and putting yourself in this position and to coming down here and the recidivism rate out of that program. He had the numbers, the gentleman who ran it, and I'm going to throw this out. I don't know if it's correct as far as, but he said something like 3,000 or 4,000 inmates have gone through this, and they had like 10 come back. So I mean, you see a program that's working, and so when I heard that, I told him, I said, well, if I'm elected, can I come back? And he said, absolutely. So my goal is to go back in 2 months when our church goes back. But I'm going to reach out before then because he said, this is a program that you can possibly do in your own jail. And obviously on a smaller case, but it might be something that might work with Mike. Because again, I look at the return rate. When you've got all these other programs that cost so much money, and I'm not saying this program's free, but they're doing something right. And so when I found out that my jail administrator, who no longer works for me, basically kicked out the churches from coming down and preaching to the gentleman. I thought, what are we doing? Here's an avenue that we know works, but we're ignoring it. And I've seen how it works by going down to the prison and seeing how they've got it running, and obviously on a larger scale. So to answer your question, we do want to involve the churches, and we want to start a program such as that that's already shown successful.
I'd like to thank you all for your service. And I'd like to ask, in your jurisdiction, are you aware of any non-American groups that are training people for evil? For instance, I have become aware that imams can go into jails in this country and program people that have had problems in their childhood and their brains are fried. And you were talking about, this is what brings me up to ask this, is because you mentioned the Christian aspect of going in. I asked Dr. Medina down in New Orleans years ago, I said, you know, if you bring in the Bible into your jails and you take the Coca-Cola away from them, now it's more than Coca-Cola, you might be able to save some of these people. He says, Rusty, don't you understand? Their brains are fried. They can't. But some of these brains aren't fried. They're switched off to a different evil avenue. Instead of following the good railroad track, they're going down the evil railroad track. So the question is, in your jurisdiction of Garland and Saline, are you aware, or are your people under you, your people, how do you say, your officers under you, keeping their minds open to watch for such an entity in our wonderful area that we live in? Again, thank you for rising up. Thank you for being young enough to be able to rise up, and you will be in my prayers daily.
I will say that one of the, as far as recognizing groups that are in our area, one thing that we do, we stay in contact with the FBI constantly. I get probably one email a day, and also what's called the Fusion Center, which is in Little Rock, and it's right out of the state police. That's where all the information, basically from the whole country, filters into this Fusion Center, and then it's pushed back out to who needs it. And what I mean by that is that they don't. There's a lot of information that comes in, but it may not affect Garland County or it may not affect Saline County, so we don't get that information. But if it affects us, they shoot it out to us, saying, hey, be aware that this group, we've had information that certain websites are being accessed by people, be on the watch for this particular person. So as far as us being aware, yes, they keep us very informed. I was at the Arkansas Sheriff Association conference last week. FBI was there, Homeland Security was there, and they basically hit the same thing, saying, "Hey guys, here's what's going on, and again, if it's happening in your area, we'll forward it to you. We'll push it to you." And that was part of going there and making sure everyone had our emails and so forth. So we are keeping aware, and they're doing a good job.
Thank you.
We do have organizations in Arkansas, and some of them are domestic, some of them are international terrorism groups. And as recently as, last year, year before last, that the recruiter was shot and killed down in Little Rock by international terrorists. So he was in Arkansas, and then the shooting that occurred out of West Memphis of the two officers on the highway. That was a domestic terrorism group. So we're aware of it, and we do share that information. I'm not aware of any group's locations, but they are here. They're in the state, and we work diligently to identify them and pass that information on and share it.
And I'm not aware of any within Garland County, but once again, just mirroring what you just heard, there is a tremendous effort made by a lot of different organizations, the FBI just being one of them, that spends a great deal of time, a great deal of money monitoring just those issues.
Thank you.
Just a general question. I have children that live in Colorado. Have you seen any spillover from the legalization of marijuana within the states?
We have. Just as recently as the 1st of December, our highway guy stopped a truck that came from there. Now they weren't coming to our state to sell it. They were actually passing through, but they didn't make it. And we got over 100 pounds of marijuana. No, I'm sorry, 500 pounds. But you know what we saw in the vehicle was kind of crazy. It wasn't the 500 pounds of marijuana that shocked me. It was what they were doing while they were driving, and they were eating candy. But it wasn't regular candy. They looked like gummy bears, but they were gummy bears with THC in them that they had bought in Colorado. And then there was another, there was a candy bar that looked like a nutrition bar, and it had the amount of THC in it. So they had all these things that they're snacking on while they're driving, and they had purchased in Colorado. And what's bad is, and I've got a 14-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son. I would hate to know that, when we go vacation in Colorado, that, obviously you need to know what store you're in, but they've got candy like this that's, looks like a gummy bear, looks like a candy bar, sweet tarts, you name it, they've made it into something that's, it's eye candy, and it's got marijuana in it. We had an officer go out to Colorado for a conference, Kevin Russell, Denton PD, and he went and rode with Denver PD, and he said that they are having the worst time ever. They said it's out of control. They said they've got more impaired drivers than they've ever seen before. And he said, this is Kevin telling me this, he said they went and ate somewhere, and he said, I swear the person that was serving me was high as a kite. Because there's nothing that says that they can't take their break and go, obviously each business probably has their own drug policy, but it doesn't sound like they're a whole lot. But yeah, we've seen it come down like that. But again, Denver PD, they're telling us it's the worst thing that could have happened to them.
One of you two want to take it?
There's a lady over there.
Get to you, Barbara. Let Mike.
Where I see the big difference is the way the mentality is kind of swinging to the direction of legalizing it here in Arkansas. And just my opinion, for not really worth anything, but I could see it being legalized here in Arkansas in the years to come. And Colorado was one of the first.
Okay. You guys?
The only thing I'll say is, it goes back to overcrowding of our penal institutions, the prisons. They're letting more and more people out of prison who haven't committed violent crimes, and they don't consider the possession of marijuana a violent crime. And it's a shift, it's in thinking. We've got a different generation, younger people. We're going to see it. Texas will probably be the next large state that will see it occur, even though the governor's been fighting it in Texas, it's gonna occur. I hate to say it.
Barbara's next, Eric.
Attacking the question of various quasi-terrorist groups, and you listed marijuana. With the price of camera drones falling to just a couple $100s, has the sheriff's department have any plans to maybe use drones to check out some areas that might be less expensive to do that than actual aerial survey?
We have not. Now, there are grants for drones. I'll just tell you flat out, I have not looked into them. If you're gonna go buy one, you can buy, it seems like my son could go buy one and it would only cost $200, but if it's for law enforcement, it's $2,000, and it's the same drone. And so, as far as us, we have not looked into it. We still have available state police helicopter, and we also have available Water Rock helicopter and National Guard. If we suspect we have an area, of course we have a big national forest, but Game and Fish and the Forestry Commission pretty well take care of that for us, thank goodness. But I think there's going to be, if there's not already, I think there's going to be new legislation on drones real soon, if it hadn't already done, because of the privacy issues. You know, there are people are using them to go over people's fences and you know, record house to house. And so I think as you see drones developing, you're going to start seeing laws that are going to go right along with them about things you can and can't do with them.
Just to add to that, there is legislation already in Texas that prohibits law enforcement from using drones for the purpose of investigating certain issues. I think the feds are going to pass the same legislation, so they just make it harder and harder for us to be able to do our job. Everybody will have a drone except law enforcement, so in my opinion. And I've been in business 40 years and I feel very safe in saying that. If it's law enforcement related, we probably won't see them. Except under special cases, and it will probably be handled the same way as a phone tap. We'll have to have a court order or a search warrant issued by probably a federal magistrate.
I think you guys covered it real well.
Your program's still classified, isn't it?
Comment on the drone issue is you do understand that your tax assessor uses drones. You know, they subcontract, they use drone, they do surveillance. There have been some court cases arguing about that. I don't know the outcomes. I would hope that y'all are allowed to use them for surveillance when you have people in a lockdown or in something. But I wanted to talk about the marijuana again. And Mike, I'll kind of direct this question to you because I'm familiar with Garland County, not to slight you other fellas. If you arrested everybody in Garland County that smoked grass on Saturday night, you'd have to take them down to the convention center, and then you'd have to use the Lakeside and Hot Springs football fields. So my real question is, what are we doing? How are we training our officers? And at what point how do we identify when they're under the influence? You know, in alcohol, we have a good standard. I mean, you can give a test, and then you can give a blood test. And I think the biggest thing is, before we legalize marijuana, is we have to come up with a viable test that you can either extract blood or something that you can do that says this person is under the influence or isn't. And we all know that there's people that what the drunk standard is are pretty functional. We know people that far below that drunk standard aren't functional, but it's a good mean. But how are we going to do that? And how are you all training your officers with the people in marijuana? Because it's a big problem today, and it's not legal here, but we just couldn't lock them all up anyway, folks. Thank you.
Mike, I'll give you first comment.
There actually is a program that a lot of officers in Arkansas and throughout the United States have gone through, and they're referred to as DREs. drug recognition experts. And it's very similar to someone doing a field sobriety test for alcohol. They can tell by a multitude of different factors from the body, whether it be the pupil dilation, whether it be the slurred speech. There's a whole list of things that they go through. And it's a pretty intensive training course. We've got a couple at the Sheriff's Office. I know the Police Department's got several. The State Police has a lot of DRE certified troopers. So it's something that actually has been in place for quite a while now.
How's that working in court when they get to court? What are we finding? I should ask that as part of my question. When you get into court for a prosecution, what kind of conviction rates are we getting, or does a lot of that go away there because it's not finite?
If the tests are done properly and documented properly and the officer is certified, as he should be, it's recognized by the courts.
Thank you.
And one other thing on the marijuana, you can test their blood to, it'll tell you the level of THC. Basically, if someone smoked it on Monday and then you pulled them over on Friday and you're accusing them of being under the influence of marijuana, obviously you're going to have a lot of other factors going along with that, their manner of driving and so forth. But when they test their blood, it'll give you a level of THC, and they've got that mapped out on far as whether the person just did it or they did it 7 days ago, based on that level. So, but that's also expensive, and so it's not something that can be done on the side of the road with a portable breath test. But it will separate your I used it today versus I used it a week ago. That's what Denver's using.
Thank you.
I just have a question for any of you. Is growing marijuana in Arkansas illegal? And if so, are there any steps being taken to find or penalize those who are growers?
Absolutely, it is illegal, and we're using the same methods to detect that we do any other violation. But as George said earlier, it's a matter of priorities. If you've got 5 deputies working a county and they're going from call to call, that's something that is not going to be your #1 priority. It's on the list, but it's a matter of dealing with more pressing issues at the time. And I really believe when you come to marijuana, it's more of a social issue than it is a law enforcement issue, more so every day.
It is illegal, but I tell you that one of the things that we're seeing more and more is heroin. So I don't know if Sheriff McCormick's, I'm sure it is, but heroin is starting to become, because it's cheaper than meth, and they can get it, and so that's one of the things in Saline County that we've never seen. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I couldn't tell you what heroin probably looked like, but now we're seeing it, and so it's like everything else. It takes a little time before it gets to us, and we better start educating ourselves on it real quick because it's here.
One thing here, on behalf of one of my neighbors down here, the owner of Trophies, had the occasion of visiting with him after the fuel bandit episode of Fountain Lake School. Visited with him, and he reports that he was robbed in a similar way of fuel, a large amount of fuel, and expressed a lot of exasperation. He says, "I know a lot of the people that are robbing and doing break-ins in here. He thinks he knows where a lot of them, who they are and where they live." He said, "I can take you around right now. We could go out right now and I could show you," I'm roughly paraphrasing, half a dozen houses where they're cooking meth and dealing. And that feeling doesn't seem to be that rare among people I've associated with in Garland County from time to time. And I wonder if you might comment on that, and will the Will the availability of more lodging for prisoners alleviate that? Do sheriff deputies know where these people are as well as the neighbors out there who think they know where they are? And will you be going and picking them up and relocating them into other lodging facilities?
The new detention facility is gonna help us in so many ways, but we've gotta keep in mind, we've got civil liberties that we must protect, we've got constitutional rights that everybody is entitled to. Just knowing something is going on at a certain place is not enough. We have to have probable cause, we have to build a case that doesn't violate civil liberties, it doesn't violate the Constitution, and yet is strong enough that we can present the evidence in a court of law and get a conviction. Very, very few things in life are as simple as what they appear. And yeah, I hear that all the time. I could take you to 10 houses where they're dealing with marijuana, meth, heroin, whatever the case may be. But to get a prosecutable case, it takes so much more.
Not talking necessarily about narcotics or drugs, but yeah, we know where our thieves live. We know in the village who our copper thieves are. You know, they go in to strip these new houses of all the copper, or they steal the air conditioning, or whatever the case may be. We know who's doing it. It's just like the sheriff says, you got to be able to make a case to present to the prosecutor in order to get an indictment. Copper is very hard to identify once it's been stolen. They generally melt all the insulation off of it, and they take it in a big wad. Now there's ways that we can track it, and there's laws on the people who purchase that stuff. But we know as well as the residents, but like he says, that you have to have probable cause to go on their property or enter their homes. More than just mere objections.
But it also does go back to overcrowding in your jails too. What both the gentlemen just said are correct. But you know, it's disheartening when you do make an arrest and you can tell the victim, hey, I made an arrest, and you put them in jail, and before you get through talking to the victim, the guy's walking out. And so, you know, what does that show the victim? Unfortunately, the way our overcrowding is, we have to. Because like Friday, when I left the sheriff's office, our max capacity is, I think, 225. We had 236. And so we were having, the judge was on the phone, and he had to get rid of some people because we couldn't go into the weekend like that. So it's disheartening when you do make an arrest that they're right out before you say you get done even telling the victim that you made an arrest. But right now, in my jail, I've got 78 state prisoners that we're holding that have already been sentenced to ADC. There's no bed space. So we're stuck housing 78 state prisoners at roughly $47 a day, and we're only getting paid $28 a day from the state. So I'm no math wizard, but we're losing money. But you know, they're working on it right now in the legislation, so I don't know what that's going to be like. But you've got the same problem.
We've got 50, and we haven't been paid in 6 months.
Yeah. And it just goes all around the state. Everybody with a jail has got state prisoners sitting in their jail right now. So when y'all hear about building a new prison, there's a good reason for it, but I don't know what the solution is, because they're talking that a new prison is $100 million just to house probably 1,000 or so. That's 1,100 that's housed right now around the state in our county facilities. And it's taking our bed space that we could arrest the people that stole the copper. Just don't know the solution.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. You can stay if you want, but we're going to officially adjourn. If you want to talk some more, that's fine. But it's past 1. You don't have to leave if you don't want to. But I would like to ask all of you to give Chief Adams, Sheriff McCormick, and Sheriff Wright a big round of applause. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming in. It's a very interesting program. I appreciate it. And invite you to come back next month on the 3rd of March for another very interesting program. So you can hear more about that later. Thank you so much. If you want to ask something, go ahead, but they're going to try to get away. George, you had something you wanted to?